Thank you. My Dick Cheney story will satisfy people on the conservative side and people on the liberal side, because I put him in the hospital. We were playing a flag football game and we got tangled up, and he ended up blowing out his knee. So it was an interesting time. I rooted for him to become vice president because then I knew I would be a footnote in history someplace. So, but you got to dig pretty deep to find it. Thank you all for coming. I come here very humbly, and I do that not because I'm humble, but because my son said, "Who in the hell would come listen to you?" So I'm surrounded by that kind of stuff, and off we go. I want to talk a little bit this morning about passion, and you know, there's this idea that if you have passion about whatever you do, you're going to have success and happiness. And I want to take a little closer look at that and see where that leads us. And specifically, I'd like to look at it with respect to success and significance, and maybe draw a line between those two areas, because I think it's important that as we go forward. First of all, disclaimer. Everything has a disclaimer these days, so I'm going to start with one right off the bat, in case there are any trial lawyers in here that are going to sue me later. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a business consultant. I'm not a minister. And I'm not a fortune teller. So these are just some reflections of a guy who has gone through a number of situations. And I'm going to try to draw some rules and some lessons out of those experiences. I've had a lot of people come to me because of my diverse background from an employment standpoint. I practiced law for 15 years. I was in a small business for a period of time, and my partner bought me out. I was then did a turnaround business. I then did some public service, in between there, and then ended up at Liberty. So because of the fact that I've had multi-careers, a lot of people have come to me and said, you know, I'm 40, and I'm not going where I thought I was going to go. Can you help me? I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. I need to change. Help me change, figure out where we are. And that's kind of the background that I want to share with you as we start. And I'm going to do it in a little bit of a bizarre way. I'm going to have some snapshots. And bear with me, because I hope those snapshots will help you. One night in July, that was a big quarter for us at Liberty Northwest, where we had a lot of our sales, and we were getting a substantial amount of pressure from our main competitor, and they beat us up that July, and it was not a real pleasant night for me, and I was quite anxious to go home and have a glass of wine. But I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce, and I had to go to Nike. How many people from Nike here? I understand there's some people from Nike. Good, I can tell the story in any event. But, so I got out, I headed out to Nike, and it was a chamber event, and walked into Nike, and we all met in the auditorium, and they got up and said, "We're going to tell you about the story of Nike." And I thought, oh, I don't want to hear the story of Nike. I know about Nike. You know, where's the glass of wine that I want? And so they flicked on the video, and it was the 1970s Olympics, 74, with Prefontaine. And kind of a flicking thing, and the announcers were Marty LaCour and Jim McKay, who some of you who are sports fans will remember the old days. And they were commenting that this young man who was bobbing along for the first two miles was Steve Prefontaine, and he was 21 years old, and he had a lot of talent, but this was not his year. He wasn't going to do anything. He should be out there learning about the experience of what he's got, and hang in there and follow some of these good runners and last as long as he can go. And then it flicked ahead, and all of a sudden, with 4 laps to go, Prefontaine took off, and he went to the front. And they said, "Oh, what is he doing? I mean, you don't do this. I mean, you need to stay back. You need to conserve your energy. This guy doesn't have any chance in any event. Why is he going out there and burning himself out?" Well, those laps had been going at 400 meters for about 67 seconds, and he went out and ran one, if I remember correctly, in 63 or 62 seconds, and then one in 61 seconds, and took the lead. And they said, well, don't pay any attention to Prefontaine because the two great runners are the Finn, who is behind him, and the Britisher, who is behind him, and et cetera down the line. But he kept going. 2 laps to go. Prefontaine's still on the lead, and they can't believe it. And then all of a sudden, with 600 meters left, off goes Varenne, who is the Finn, who catches Prefontaine and goes by him. And following that gentleman is another runner who is a world-class runner who goes by, and now Prefontaine's in 3rd place. And LaCour and McKay said, okay, that's what's going to happen. It was a nice run. He did what he could do. I don't know why wait a minute. What's he doing? And Prefontaine took off again. And he caught him and he passed him. And they said, this doesn't make any sense at all. And as they came around, he ran a 60.3 quarter. And he's in the lead for the Bill lap. And they get down, and there's about, on the backstretch, about 250 meters left to go. And he's passed again by the first runner and by the second runner. And they said, okay, now he's dead. He's run himself out. Wait a minute, there he goes again. And he took out after him, and he caught the front runner, and he couldn't get by him. And you know how they do it in track. They keep moving out on the track to force him out. And as they forced him out, you could see him starting to die. And the first runner ran away from him. And then the second runner went by him. And here came the third runner, and they kept saying, why didn't he wait? Why didn't he wait? Why didn't he wait? He could have had a bronze medal. Can he hang in there? And what you saw was a guy that was on fumes as he came down, and he was edged out for 4th place, or for 3rd place at the last gap. The lights went out, back on again. And they said, this is the soul of Nike. There's all kinds of plaques all over this place, but there's only one statue, and that's Prefontaine. And the reason there's one statute is that he gave everything he had to win that race. And he didn't care whether he lost or not. His honor was to do what he had in mind, and that was, his creed was, I want to suck the air out of everybody. And if I have anything left at the end, I have not honored what I have in me. Switch over, 1974. Came back from my payboard experience, and because I didn't have a caseload, I got assigned a case by Safeco Insurance, who was insuring Phil Knight. And Phil Knight had been sued by Onitsuka, which had been the supplier of the shoes that he was involved in. And I got involved in the litigation and spent a year going around the country listening to the depositions that took place. Phil Knight is a fascinating guy. I think very much misunderstood. But very interesting is that Phil Knight is Steve Prefontaine in business clothes. He had exactly the same philosophy. I can't tell you how many times Nike just about went broke. I will tell you that they didn't have any money in Onitsuka. In essence, Knight, you know the story about selling the shoes out of the car, got it going. And when he got it going, Onitsuka came to him and said, okay, we think we want to take over, and what we'll do is we'll give you X amount of dollars for it. And he said, no way, I won't take that. This is my company, I'm going to fight back. And that's how Nike got started. And as they fought, it was literally David versus Goliath. And I happened to be there the day that Onitsuka came up with its final offer. And it was a lot of money. Not a lot of money compared to the $9 billion he's worth now, but an awful lot of money. But he's a Prefontaine. Even though the odds were not very good, in my estimation at that particular time, he had a belief that this company was going to succeed and that he'd win the trial. They went to trial, and some very interesting things happened there. One of the Japanese witnesses, they discovered a memo, and the memo dissolved their case, and Onitsuka decided they had to settle the case, and they did. And as a result of that, Nike got the foothold that it needed to become the company that it is now. Now, let's stop there for a minute and see what we get out of all that. First of all is that what is obvious in that snapshot is that both Knight and Prefontaine hated to lose, one. And number two is that they were going to answer to themselves and not to others. Prefontaine took on the establishment. He broke every mold there was with respect to how to run, because he had an idea, following some of the professional runners of that time, or the pros of that time, not in the sense of getting money, but the premier runners, that the way to do this was to push yourself as hard as you could. Knight, on the other hand, pushed himself with respect to taking a business concept that he developed in law school, or excuse me, in graduate school, and he was going to take a Japanese model of German cameras, take those quality German cameras, reproduce them in Japan for a lesser cost, and go out and compete with the Germans. He was doing exactly the same thing with sports shoes. He was taking on Adidas and Puma. Go to Japan, get the cheaper labor that he had there, get a foothold, and off he goes. Just as a little side story of all that is that, as you know, the holding company is BRS, and Phil had one appointment over there, and it was with Onitsuka. And the night before, he was sitting having dinner and drinking a beer, and he thought, you know, they're going to ask me the name of my company. I don't even have a company. I better make something up here. And he was drinking a Pat's Blue Ribbon beer. And he said, that Blue Ribbon, that's a good idea. So it was Blue Ribbon Sports, which is now BRS Inc., which is the holding company, and that's where it came from. Just a little sidelight there. Now, I have a rule in my life that I follow, and that is that I insist that I be honest with myself. And the night that I went out there, I was tired and I was frustrated, but I've got to be honest with myself. I was feeling sorry for myself. And watching Prefontaine and thinking about what Knight had done made me realize how much I really had to, that I was not working hard enough, and I was not planning hard enough to push where I was. And yes, we were in a difficult circumstance, but look at the difficult circumstance that they were in, and they were going forward. But also being honest with myself, I'm not going to be Prefontaine. I'm not going to be Phil Knight. I'm not built that way. You know, my family had a difficult time when I was young, and I'm a security-based guy. I couldn't go out and risk everything. How I would come home and tell my wife and kids that, you know, we lost everything, I couldn't do that. So I'd like to switch a little bit and take this back maybe to an example of what they did, first of all, that I think is important. And that is that one of the things that happened here is that there was passion, but that passion resulted in commitment. And that commitment resulted in focus. With Phil's case, he had a business plan. Prefontaine had an idea how to run this race, to suck the air out of him as he ran. Now, both of those things meant that they had to prepare and have hard work as a result of that. And if they had that preparation, and they did that hard work, and they did the basics that were involved, then from that would come some success. And with that success would come a confidence which would allow them to have greater success. And I think those rules are there. Now let me give you an example, and I've changed the name because some of you may know him. A friend of mine started out and wanted to be a broker, and went to work for one of the brokerage houses, and that's a very tough business, as you know, and he failed. So he went back to the family business. Did pretty well in the family business, but the family business was in an industry that got killed. And he realized it and said, okay, before I go bankrupt, I'm going to close this thing down and sell it out. And he went out to look for another job, and he went into real estate. And he worked really hard in real estate, went to work for a friend of mine, and developed a niche, worked really hard at it, learned the details of the business, and did pretty well. And annual review came around, and my friend said to my other friend, this is what I'd like to get out of you. And he said, well, I could do that if you would send me a little business every once in a while. As the head guy, you get these deals. And my friend looked at him and said, you know, when I get something like that, it's like baseball. I send in the best pitcher I've got in relief pitching. I don't send somebody in who is second string. My friend was very offended, and so offended that he said, I've got to do something, and I've got to go honor where I am. and he went out on his own. And he's tripled his business. He's been extremely successful. Probably the sad part is that two friends aren't as close to friends as they used to be. But one of them acknowledges that he underestimated the other, which is perfect. And the second one had enough gumption to pick up and decide to go where they wanted to go. But again, that commitment came out of focus. But remember what happened behind it. There was some hard work and preparation and understanding where they're going. So if you hit that frustration barrier, for Pete's sake, make sure you have a plan. Make sure that you know where you are as you go forward. But I'd submit something else to you, and that is that there is something besides success, business success. One of my good friends, Clarice Poppard, who is here, will tell you that when you get to retirement, you find an awful lot of people who were very successful in their business careers that retire, and they're miserable because all of a sudden their life has gone away. And I'll tell you, success in business doesn't have anything to do with success in life. My mother used to always say, don't ever confuse money and class, because the two of them are unrelated. And money is not an object that is there. One of my great heroes is Mark Hatfield. And a snapshot of Mark Hatfield will reveal that Mark Hatfield was a tremendous guy, but Mark Hatfield wasn't perfect. As his daughter said at the honorarium, you know, a lot of you talk about St. Mark, and I don't know who he is. And which means that he was a regular guy, but a very successful guy. And Mark Hatfield did three things that always very much impressed me. He stood up and he voted against Vietnam. He stood up and he voted against a balanced budget. And both of those took tremendous courage. Frankly, I disagreed with both of his positions. But the kind of person that he was and the way he lived his life, you honored him for what he was, and you listened to where he was, and he furthered the public debate on both of those issues, which I think is so important. But there's another part of Mark Hatfield that I admire even more. Richard Nixon, when he was impeached and resigned, was of course someone that no one wanted to touch. Only one person went to see him every day. Sat with him, talked with him, prayed with him. Only one person then went to see him on a weekly basis in the months that followed. Only one person went out to visit him on a consistent basis when he went back to California. And that man was Mark Hatfield. Now that's grace. That's living your belief. And when someone asked him, why did you do that? He said, this is a man that God loves. How can I not love him also? Now that impact, I think, is phenomenal. And in this world, I believe that I'm one of these few that believes that there's still some right and wrong in the world. And this world is calling and crying for some leadership. And it's in your workplace every single day. And it's a point where those of you who feel that there is some significance to what you're doing needs to express that. In ways when things are going wrong, you need to stand up and say, they're going in the wrong direction. But I think to get that happiness, you have to find your own purpose first. My experience came when I got a false alarm that said that I had kidney cancer and they were going to pop the kidney out, and I started thinking, as I always do, about the worst event, alternative of the whole thing. And within 2 weeks, I went back into the doctor, and they found that they had misread the X-rays or the MRI, and as a result, I didn't have any difficulty at all. But I remember standing in the shower thinking, okay, if this is the end, if I was the big guy up there, what would I say? And the answer was, you know, you're a pretty good guy, Stu, and you almost made it. And that said to me, maybe I ought to go back and do something. And I searched for what that was, and I put together with a friend of mine who was slated to be your speaker next week, Dick Wright. whose mother just had a heart attack, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to speak or not. Roger knows more about that than I do. But we decided what we would do is invite a bunch of people together to sit down and talk about the spiritual side that we're CEO business leaders. And Mark Hatfield was our first speaker. And as a result of that, it worked out pretty well. I got Mark as a speaker, and the second time we met, and this was just an eclectic group that we invited in. We didn't know if they had any faith background or not, and frankly, we weren't too concerned about it. We wanted to talk about the base that was there. And got along fine. We said, hey, let's do this again. So Dick called me up and said, I'm supposed to get a speaker, and life's been really fast, so what I'm going to do is stand up and give a little bit of a testimonial. What do you think? And I said, sure, fine, go ahead. So I thought it was very good, and I went to a meeting a couple days later and ran into two of the people that were there, and I said, what'd you think of Dick's testimonial? And they said, ooh, man, I hope I never have to do that. And I said, okay. Everybody moves at a different pace with respect to how they feel and the comfort that they feel. That's good to know. So I didn't know what I was going to do, and I ended up getting a magazine, and the magazine was a magazine called LifeWorks, and the idea of the thing is that it was Moses management style. So I cut it out and said, hey, this is perfect. Sent it out to read it. As we started around the tables to read, I came to one of these people who was the president of one of the largest banks in Oregon. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So I stood up and said, so-and-so, you don't have to speak here. We don't have any rules yet. And he stood up and he said, I want to speak. He said, you know, I went to a Catholic high school. And something a lot of people don't know, I never graduated from college. Went to work for the bank the day after I got out of high school. He said, I've been tremendously successful in my professional life. He said, I can't believe what has happened to me. And he said, in my personal life, I've got great kids, I've got a great wife. I can't believe what has happened to me. And he said, you know, I gave up thinking about God a long time ago because, one, I didn't have time. Number two, if I thought about it from a scientific basis, it probably didn't exist. And the only reason I came to this meeting was I go to events where the people that I have some respect for invite me to, and that's the only reason I came. I like Dick and Stu, and as a result, I came. And he said, I listened to Mark Hatfield, and I listened to Dick Wright, and I suddenly realized that I had a great void in my life. And he said, I hadn't been to church in 25 years. He said, I went down and bought a Bible. He said, I've gone to see my priest, and I think I'm filling that void. That group has brought me more satisfaction. It's led me more places to make statements that I think are statements that I want to make, and statements that people have come back and have said has some significance. That I think that's a passion that was exposed in me. I know all of you have passions also, and I think you can make a difference in your workplace. You can make a difference with the people around you. And I would beg you to honor your passion. I'd be happy to take some questions if you have any. Did I use up too much time? I don't look at the time. I'm okay. Hey.
Does anyone have any questions for Stu?
That thrills me to death. My wife questions me all the time.
Stu, I know you quite well, so I won't ask you any embarrassing questions.
Thank you.
Why did you tell us one of your hardest decisions in handling personnel?
So the question, am I on? The question is, what is one of the hardest decisions you've had to handle when dealing with personnel?
Well, that's a real easy one, and that is letting somebody go. I never enjoyed it. I forced my way through it. I had a very, very close friend that I had to let go. And but what I realized over time is that, and I'll go back to the example of my friend. He was in the wrong place. He was better off someplace else. And I think the most important thing to do in those decisions is to make sure that that person understands that there's nothing wrong with them as a person. It's just that the business didn't work, okay? And again, in the greater measure of things, that business part isn't that important. You know, it's the other things about them that are important, and that they've got the opportunity to go someplace and let those features shine. But without question, that's the most difficult.
Any other questions? Other questions?
I will say one other thing that I think that is difficult for a lot of people, and that is I've had some opportunities that I've turned down. And I think you have to be very careful about what you accept. And again, passion is a wonderful thing, but passion can create some real difficulty. So don't let the passion run away without some logic attached to it. Thank you very much, all of you. Appreciate it.